All right, I think I fixed the sound. Okay. Welcome to the second week of our coding camp together. Today we're going to be diving into something in some ways very different than what we did last week, but you'll see how all these things end up coming together after we get a bit of the groundwork done on more of the programming side of things. So up until last week, yeah, we did a bunch of HTML, a bunch of CSS, learned how to build a pretty basic website, and it was a lot of fun, and I hope you all learned a bunch. At the end of the week, I kind of dropped a bomb on everyone saying, like, you know, we haven't actually really started programming yet, because technically HTML and CSS is not programming. It is considered markup. It's really just configuring things, following rule sets and setting things up to display the way you want. But we didn't write any actual like logic. We didn't have any things being like, you know, if this is true, do this, or if that, do this. We didn't do anything like that, which is basically what we're going to be getting into today. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. So at least there's some points on my screen. One moment. Share screen, and we will share the screen. Okay. Some notes up here, stuff we're going to go over. So first of all, what really is programming? So programming is essentially telling a computer what to do. And it can be conditional, meaning you can have things happen because other things happened. You know, they work. It's basically, I mean, the word that people usually use to explain it is, you know, the word algorithm is a good example. Essentially, an algorithm is really just a bunch of statements that can return different results based on its input. So we're going to be now programming. JavaScript is one example of a programming language that we can use. And it's what we're going to be using for examples, but you're going to find that a lot of today, the concepts we're talking about do apply to pretty much any programming language. They all follow certain paradigms. They have, of course, different syntax, which is like the types of words you use and when you use quotation marks and that kind of thing. But ultimately, they're all doing the same thing. The reason I want to use JavaScript is because it's easy to get up and running. You don't have to, since we have a web browser, it's already installed on any of your web browsers. So we don't have to worry about doing anything too tricky. It also means when we kind of get through a bit of the basics here, we can go back to the website we were building last week and actually apply some of these new things to it and keep growing, because JavaScript is a web language. It was invented around the time, early days of the browser, and it was just meant for running in a web browser. And that's almost the case now. It still, of course, runs in a web browser, but there is also a server-side version of JavaScript, meaning instead of running in your web browser, it's actually running on a computer somewhere else and doing what things, you know, doing things like talking to databases and sending data back to users and that kind of thing. We're not going to be getting into anything on Node. We're just going to be working in the Java browser's implementation of JavaScript. But Node is, you know, once you kind of learn this, you would in theory be able to pick that up because it's basically the same concept. And what we're also going to use today, if you look at our screen here, today is very much going to be just a lot more on the lecture side of things. If you do feel like playing around, I recommend rather than, you know, spinning up a whole new website and having to figure out how to include a JavaScript file and all that, there's this great place called playcode.io, which by default will bring you to something like this. But if you go down here and just go to empty, that's essentially what we're going to be working off of. And this just allows us to test and run JavaScript stuff without actually, setting up all these files and everything. So it's a fun way to do it. And what I'm actually going to do, just to keep everything good for our purposes, I'm going to kind of like hide this little guy so we have a little more space to work with. I'm also don't really even care right now about an index.html or style, so we're just going to be focusing on the script. And I'm also going to get rid of the result view. And I'm going to move this guy onto the side. So essentially what we have is where we would write our code over here. And this is like the console, which is what will output results in our code. So I'm also going to disable this live mode so that I have to click run to basically actually execute it. So we're going to get right into it. And the first things we're going to be talking about, we're going to be using JavaScript as the toolbox, but all of these things really apply to pretty much any programming language. So the fundamental, the first and simplest thing to talk about are called variables. So variables are kind of like a little box. They store information in them. To create a variable, we use the word let, and we give the variable a name called, let's call it my variable. And then we assign a value to it. So to assign it, we actually put an equal sign. And then if we wanted this to store, for instance, a word or two, we can use quotation marks, and we can go hello world like that. And we can follow it with a semicolon. In JavaScript, semicolons technically aren't required, but it is good practice because there are a few cases where they are needed. So it's better to always include them after each line. So all this is saying is we're making a variable, we're calling it my variable, and we're assigning it this text here. And if I was to run this, which I can do by hitting this run, nothing is going to happen because all we said is like, put this in here. We actually have to do something with this. There's various things we could do. The most basic would be a built-in JavaScript function called alert. And we can put in that the word my variable and another semicolon. And if we were to run this, it actually does an alert on the screen. I'm sure you've seen alerts before. They're usually, if you fill out a form wrong, maybe you'll get something. They're kind of ugly, but they work and they're good for testing like this. And that's all good. But the preferred way to, what would be called debugging data is actually to use what's called the console. And I have my console over here. Every web browser has a console built in, assuming you have development mode on. So instead of alert, I'm actually going to do console.log my variable. And if I run that, we're going to see in the console that it actually logged that. And I could log this multiple times. Oops, I pushed Command S by accident because that's just force of habit. Command R to run, and we can see that it did it multiple times. So that's all good. Let's make another variable. Let my number variable equal 3. And we'll get rid of one of these console logs and change this one to actually output my variable, my number variable. And if we run this, you'll see the number. Very good. So that's pretty self-explanatory so far. We're essentially just putting things in these variables and then we're logging them afterwards just to make sure that it worked. Let's do something a little more fun here. Instead of console logging just my variable, let's do something called, let's do an operation on this. So there's various operations in any programming language, and they're also on calculators for the most part. You have plus signs, minus signs, divide by signs, multiply by signs. These are some of the most basic operators. So for instance, I could actually, let's make another variable called my number variable 2. We'll make the value but 5. If I was to log this one, like we did before, we should see, because I kept those in there, don't keep those in there. Should see the number 3. And of course, if I was to log this one, we would see the number 5. But what if I actually created a new variable called sum, and I made it equal to my number variable plus, there's that operator, my number variable 2. And if we actually console log the sum, so we're taking this and this, adding them together and storing them in another little box called sum. If we console log this, we should see 8. Because look, we just did our first algorithm. It's probably the most simplest algorithm you could ever make, but it is one because we are taking two things and adding them together. We can also multiply here. Now, sum wouldn't be the correct word here, but I'm not going to waste time changing it. And we'll see that, okay, yeah, 3 times 5 is in fact 15. We can subtract minus 2. We can divide. There we go. That's apparently what 3 divided by 5 is, 0.6. All right. So we did a little bit of operations. We have a couple of variables here, and we're just console logging. I'm just going to call this result because it's not really a sum anymore. Keep it a little more open-ended. And we're doing things here. Okay, let's try some other stuff here. Let's I'll call this one my variable 2, and I'm going to make it my name. I'm just going to make this one say hello. And instead of result dividing these two numbers, which I'm going to actually get rid of fully, let's do something more fun. Let's try adding 2 of these words together. So we are using adding for numbers, but you can also use adding for what are called strings. And there you go. We got hello Tyler put together. Now, of course, I'd probably want to have a space here if I was really trying to do this. But the better way to really do it, because you don't necessarily know what that is we can actually add 3 things together. We can say my variable plus a blank space plus my variable 2, and we will get essentially the same thing there. So we've looked at 2 different variable types. So to take a step back here, these are called strings. I can make a comment like this. So strings are essentially start with a quotation mark and have as much text as you want within them, and then they end with a quotation mark. So it can be one word, it could be many words, it can, lots of things can fit in here. They're used a lot. Another type of variable is what's called a number. So that is a number. There's actually different types of numbers. Technically, this is an integer, but you could have something like 3.5, and that is not actually an integer. That is what's called a float. So integers are essentially like fixed whole numbers. They can be negative, they can be positive, they can go up to a pretty high number. There is a maximum that an integer can be, and then you have to decide to use a different variable type. But JavaScript, you don't even really think about it. I don't have to tell the variable ahead of time, this is going to be an integer versus a float. It essentially figures it out, but it's still a good concept to know that there are different types of numbers. So we have strings, we have numbers. Another one that is used a lot are what are called Booleans. So Booleans are only one of 2 things, basically. They're either true or they are false. So this might be, some logic behind thing that, maybe you want to, when someone signs into your website, you might want to mark something as has signed in, and you might use a Boolean because you don't really care in that case, any specific data about that person. You just want to know whether they've signed in or whether they haven't. So it's a true or false, it's Boolean, it's one or the other. One other data type that we'll get into now is called the null type. And null is the equivalent of nothing. It's not the same technically as 0, because 0 is still as a value, it's 0. Null would be, if nothing, nothing exists. A lot of times when you are doing logic, you might set something to null to start, like I might say let n equal null, and then later on change it to be something else. So null is just kind of like a safe way to kind of be like, it's nothing. It doesn't mean anything until I give it something after. So I might be like, I might set, n to null, but then I might go later on, I can reassign something to n. So I might, after this, go n equals num plus, it should be called num2, num plus num2. And if we actually console log n, and I console log in 2 spots, you can console log as much as you want. Actually see it is null, which makes it some nice blue bolder text because it's specific. It's not the same thing as, as a string. It's not a number, it's its own thing, it's just null. But after we reassigned it something else, it got that value, got a value of it. Okay, that was a few different variable types. We talked about strings. We talked about numbers, and specifically integers and floats, booleans, and let's comment this to say null. And then we did a little bit of arithmetic here, a small operation. And again, to review, we could do, you can multiply, although this won't, you can't actually multiply in that case. Let's just do, okay, n equals 10 plus 4. So we can add, we can subtract, we can multiply, we can divide. Those are pretty simple things. Okay, so that's a bit about variables, a few different types, and we got into a little bit about operations there. The next thing I want to talk about, which is used a ton, is called conditional statements. And this is where, right now, we're just kind of setting fixed things and doing very basic things. There's no real logic happening here. So enter something called the if statement. I'm just going to get rid of some things. I'll keep those up for now, just for reference. Let me just clean this up. String equals that, num f, num I, that's just num integer, num float, boolean, and n equals null. I'm just going to keep those up there for reference. Okay. So yeah, something that's used a lot is called a conditional statement. And it goes something like this. You basically are asking really the computer a question, and to start that question, you say if, and you put some brackets. And you could go if num I is equal to 3, alert, console.log is 3. So I'm basically just asking, if that number, if the value stored in this little box here is equal to 3, notice there's 2 equal signs here. The difference is this is assignment with 1 equal sign. So I'm saying, I'm making equal that. This is more like asking a question. If it is, if these 2 things are equal, do whatever is inside these curly braces here. So if we were to go here, is 3. And then I could also have what's called an else statement. So I'm essentially saying right here, if it's 3, console log this. If not, and that's what the else is for, not 3. So if I run this again, we should see the same result. But if we went and changed this value to like anything other than 3, it'll go there. So good, we wrote our first conditional. So yeah, it's just basically a question saying if the num is equal to 3, do something. If not, do that. So that's good. And that's really basic and done a lot. Other things we can do, instead of this equal sign, we can actually do things like this. If num is greater or equal to 3, we can say is greater or equal to 3. And just save a moment, not greater than equal to 3. Oh my God. So we're asking if num I is greater or equal to 3, we're going to console log the statement. And if not, we aren't. We're going to console log the not in front of it. So to play with this, and let me just move this guy down here. So let num I equal 5. Let's set it to 2. And when we go, it's saying it's not. And that's because it's not greater than 3. So it's going to do this. Now, if we make it equal to 3, we'll still get that positive response because we're saying, is it greater to or equal to 3, which of course is true. Another thing we could do here, instead of greater or equal, we can just say greater than. So if num_i is greater than 3, in this case, it's not, because it is, it is actually exactly 3. It's not greater than 3. If I was to make this, 3.1, it would still be true because we're a little bit bigger. The same thing applies for less than. That would be, if num_i is less than 3. And I'm just going to make this let's just make this say true and false, just so that we can change stuff and not have to keep retyping that. So, yep, it is not less than 3, but if we made this less than or equal to, we get that. So the ones we looked at were equals, which is comparing them to be the same. We had less than or equals, we had greater than or equals, we had less than, and we had greater than. I'm going to put these in just a comment. This is how you comment in JavaScript. It's actually similar to CSS. You've seen this before in CSS. It's the same. JavaScript also allows you to do comments this way too for single lines. So this is great right now because we have multiple lines, whereas I was doing double slash here. So those are some comparison operator. I'm not spelling that right. Never mind. The one we didn't look at yet is the opposite of equals. We can actually go with an exclamation mark here and say if it is not equal to 3. And in this case, it's false because it is 3. But if we change it to something else, we get true. So this would be true for every single case except when num_i is equal to 3. We can also compare strings. So let's try that. I'm going to make this say str equal to goodbye. So if the string is equal to goodbye, it will say true, but it's not equal to goodbye. However, if we compare that string to equal to hello, we get true. Okay, let's take this very basic stuff that we've learned and apply it to something a little more real life. So this is, it's a very basic website. And in fact, I'm going to refresh this. And I'm going to go back to this empty button here. And we're going to show it in a little more context with HTML. So I'm not going to worry about everything we need to do in HTML, like putting a tag, putting the opening tags and that kind of thing, because it will still work for these purposes. But for instance, let's just start by putting some HTML here. And I'm in the tab that says index.html in this playground and title. So we get that there. I'm going to just do a very quick style here, just so it looks a little bit better. And we'll make its background color white. There we go. And all is good. Okay, so we have a little bit of a thing here. So maybe what we want to do when someone opens up the website, for instance, is ask them for their name. There's many ways to do this. We could use a form and get them to click something. We'll get there, but let's keep this really simple. And I don't know, I'll delay every 30 seconds without authorization. Oh my God. That's going to be annoying. I might have to sign in. So what I'm going to do in my script is we're going to use a built-in JavaScript thing called, let me turn off the autoplay. We're going to make name equal to, this is a built-in, and we haven't got to functions yet, but it's a built-in thing that you can do in JavaScript called prompt. And essentially when I run this, I'm actually get a prompt that comes up on the screen that says whatever I put in here. So I'm going to say Tyler. And basically what happened there is after that prompt ran, it stored that value in this variable called name. And we can prove that by going console.log name and click play. What is your name? There we go. We could ask a few questions. And I can say age, how old are you? And color. We'll just console log all these out. Oops. So what's your name, Tyler? How old are you? I'm gonna be 20, not really. What is your favorite color? Purple. Okay, look at all those things here. 20, purple, cool. Rather than just constantly logging them to there, because that's not really useful. People aren't gonna, when they come to your website, have the console open. So what we can actually do is write this to the body. So to do that in JavaScript, you actually go document.write, and we can write in, for instance, just to test the word name. So if I click this, and I'll just cancel. I'm just gonna turn these ones off for a second, just to show this. So Tyler, if we go here, my name got written here. Now, really what we'd probably want to do with this is actually create a new variable called message. And what we're going to do is we're going to say something like hello, and then add on my name. Maybe we have an exclamation mark. You are, and I'll explain this after I write it all out. And your favorite color is color. So essentially what I've done, I've made this new variable called message, and I'm essentially writing in some custom text that I've decided as the web developer, and I'm what's called concatenating them together. Essentially adding these strings together is known as concatenation. So I'm saying hello space, and then their name, and then an exclamation mark, and blah, blah, blah. And what we can do is go document.write message. So we'll fill this out again. Tyler, how old are you? What am I, 33? And favorite color? Let's do blue this time. And now look, we have this nice dynamic message. So all we did was take the user input and combined it with sort of some built-in text. So that's cool. We have something there. So what we might also do is, what if we wanted to do something with this age variable? Like maybe we show a different message after this, depending on how old they are. So what we can actually do here is if age is greater than, let's start with, okay, if age is less than 13, we can write document.write. You are too young to visit my site. You know, there might be some swear words. We can also go if age is greater or equal to if age, no, let's do this differently. Okay, so we have this one if statement. Let's just test this first rather than getting too far ahead of ourselves. So I'm going to do Tyler. I'm going to say my age is 12. I'm just going to say blue. Oh, we got rid of, oh no. I still wanted this message. So we still want to write that message regardless. And then after, we'd essentially write something like you are too young to visit my site, which just do one more time. Tyler, I'm 12, purple. So there we go. And it did write this after. I know it doesn't look super fancy because we don't have any breaks here, but we could add that break simply by going document.write. And in here, we can do the HTML that we know for a line break. This is this here. Oh my God. And click play. 12. Red. So we get, hello, Tyler, you're 12, your favorite color is red. And then this custom message. Now, what if we wanted to check some other conditions, because right now, if I did type a big number, we no longer get that thing there because I'm 43. What if we wanted to check something like that? We could just have an else statement, and we could be like, welcome, you are, now Tyler, 33, red. So hello, Tyler, you're 33 and your favorite color is red. And then welcome, you are old enough. So that's all good, but what if I wanted a third statement that was comparing, okay, maybe for teenagers, for instance. So I can actually do something called, similar to an else statement, it is really, I can go else if, like this. So I can put another comparison here. So essentially it will never get here. If the age is less than 13, it's already like, okay, I'm going here. But if not, I can say, I can check something else. So I can say if age is less than 20, and we can write something like, welcome, you teenager, you. And I will just put these together. So we're saying if the age is less than 13, write this. If not, if the age is less than 20, write this. And then if all else fails, if none of these are true, we have this final else statement to cover and write this. So if I was to do Tyler and make my name 16 or my age 16, red, we get this message here because I was not less than 13, but I was still less than 20. Otherwise, it would have come back to this one. Okay, so there's kind of, we got, from what we showed before, we have some variables being assigned. We have some operations here, concatenating these together, and we have a little bit of comparisons happening. What else might we want to do on this site? Well, we're asking about the color, so we could probably do something pretty cool there. So we could actually do something, so we're doing document.write, which essentially just writes that text or HTML to the screen. What else could we do? We can also update aspects of the CSS. So we can go document.stylesheets, document.body.style. So this is kind of similar to the body, really we're talking about the body tag here, equals color. So what we're essentially saying is the document, which the document is the whole, essentially the whole file. And then we're using these dots to basically say, okay, so this was kind of similar in some ways to in CSS, where we could go document, body, and kind of do things. We're essentially saying the body within the document, okay, the style within that body, and specifically the color, we're going to set to that color. So let's do Tyler, 33, and let's do purple. And there, we set the color of the text to purple. Now, this isn't really the safest thing to do because, for instance, if someone, 33, and what is your favorite color? What if they just type something random? Because that's not really a valid color. It's just going to go back to black. So it's not, the best logic, but I think it kind of shows a good point here. So yeah, we just, kind of made a website a little bit customizable based on people's preferences. So that stuff's all good. Let's do some other stuff here. So I have my title. I'm also going to put a button, and I'm going to say, click me. And I'm just going to cancel these. And for now, it's because I want to show, we'll bring this back in at some point, but it's annoying to kind of keep going. I'm literally just going to comment these guys out like that. Maybe I'll do it with a multi-line comment just so it's easier to put back in. That way, we're not getting these prompts every time. So all we have is this, and we have a button that says click me, which doesn't do anything. But let's make it do something. So in order to for my code to talk to a specific button, I need to give it an ID. And I'll just call it button. So we talked a bit about IDs and classes in CSS. And I was a few times I was like, don't use IDs, don't use IDs. And the reason is they're generally reserved for JavaScript. The difference between a button and a class, or sorry, a class and ID is technically you're only allowed on each document to have, you can't have multiple buttons essentially with the same ID. It gets confused. So that's why I'm like, stay away from trying to use classes in CSS when you're styling things. Whereas we use IDs to target things in JavaScript. And of course you could, if you're talking about CSS, you could still have a class of this called button or BTN or whatever you want and style it using that. But then we give it the ID because we want to do something with it in JavaScript. Oh my God. Okay, so I have this here. I'm going to see if I can bring my scripts down here just so we can have that. I don't think we need the console right now. Okay, so we have our button. And I'm going to move all this stuff down. So if I want to deal with this in JavaScript, I'm going to make a variable and I'm going to call it button, the same name. It doesn't have to be the same name, but we'll call it button. And if we want to do something with this button, we need to select it. So to do that, we use this document again. You're going to be using this a lot. And there's a function called getElementById that you can do to buttons. And we pass in its ID here. So running this will still not do anything. But there is, if I was to console log this, and I know I just closed my console. So how do I open it back up again? Show console, show console. Shouldn't have closed it. Oh, there it is. That's the icon. Okay, yeah, we can put this over here. Sorry. Okay. And if we run it, so everything here. And what we actually console logged out is the representation of that button there. So we know that we are getting the button. Like if I rename this to button 1 and click play, it's null. It was not able to find something with the ID of button. Okay, now if we actually want to do something to this, we have to tell it. I'm just going to type this out first and then explain it. Let's make sure that was correct. There we go. We're going to do this differently. Okay, before we get that working, there's one more thing that needs to very much be explained here. Something called functions, and functions are very important. They're all over the JavaScript world. And you define it by first writing the word function, and then you give it a name. Click, and I'll just call it click function. And I might do something like this, alert, click. Okay. And I'm just comment these out for now so there's no confusion. So a function is kind of a place, so we've just kind of been writing code, right in the main JavaScript file, and that's fine for what we've been doing. But you can think of a function as kind of like a container that keeps various pieces of code that you might use. That way you can organize stuff better and you can call them at specific times. So if I was to run this again, nothing's going to happen. And that's because a function doesn't just run on its own. It has to be told to run. And the way you tell it to run is very simply just calling it, retyping it out again, and then putting these parentheses here. So basically what's happening is this function is being defined. It's not doing anything. But then as soon as I call it, which this is calling it, making the function again and going like this, it calls it there. So that's all good. And there's a lot more to functions than that, but this is enough, I think, to show what we need to do. So I don't want to just call this function when the file loads, because that's misleading. So I'm going to erase this, and we're going to put this stuff back in. And essentially what we're doing here is we already talked about this. We got the button, and we're adding what's called an event listener to it. So, and to add an event listener, the first property you put into it is what event you're listening to, in this case, click. And the second is what do you want to do when it's clicked? And I can just paste that in like that. And if I run, and when you click this, look, it's running our function. So this is a super simple function. All it does is alerting the word click, but we could do lots of things here. Whatever, like lots of different things. And in fact, let's do a little refactor here to show what I mean. So I'm going to bring these guys back, and we'll actually put these. That's fine. Okay. So rather than just alerting click, let's do some things in here. I'm going to name my button instead of click me. I'm going to say sign in. And what I'm going to do inside my click function now is actually all that stuff that we were doing just on page load, we're going to put in this function. So same code is still here. The difference now is this stuff this isn't going to run until we tell it to run. So I come here, and it's not going to run until we click the button. Till the button hears an event of click. We'll run that click function. So clicking this now, it's a little less intrusive because it didn't just show up right away. And all the same things will happen right there. Why did it? I don't know why the whole site went black, but interesting. Yeah, but it wrote the stuff. Why did the background go black though? Whatever, it's fine. We might add maybe we have a second button. And we'll call this one button 2. And I'm going to copy this line and do button 2. Currently, this button 2 is pointing to, it's going to run that exact same function. What? Did I not click play? Oh, sorry. I forgot something. We need to get button 2 in JavaScript and then say button 2 add event listener. ID button 2, button 2, do button 2. Something weird's happening. This one's still working. Why? Let me just get rid of the stuff for button 1. I don't know what's happening at the moment. ID is button 2. Okay, button 2. Oh, I see what I did. I, for some reason, decided to make that say click 2. Okay. So we get the same, it's basically calling the same thing. Oh my God, okay, refresh. So we'll make we're gonna make a new function for this one. Let's call it click 2. And we might want to make them go to another website, for instance. There's lots of things we could do here. So I can actually set the window location. And we'll rename this click function 2. And if we rerun this, it is going to bring me to google.com. Google.com is not loading right now, and I think it's just because this is like in this playground iframe sort of thing, so it's probably blocking it, but it did try and go there. So essentially what's happening here is with JavaScript, you can also interact with where people are by just going window.location and then setting it to a valid URL. Okay. Let me go back to this right here real quick. User input, bit of the DOM stuff. All right. Let's do one more thing back in our HTML. I'm going to get rid of my button 2 because it's not really needed. I'm also get rid of my click function 2, just to show that you can have multiple functions. We're going to make a input. So we did this a little bit on the last class, doing some form stuff. Equals text. And let's just rerun that. And yeah, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. I have a plan. I'm going to have 3 inputs. So I have these 3 inputs here. We're going to give these placeholders equal name. Oops, placeholder. Just so we know what these are for. We could also use labels if we wanted to. Age, color, favorite color. If we go back here, we see our wonderful, beautifully styled forms. You can put stuff in. So right now, nothing's going to change because our sign-in function is still the same. But essentially what I want to do, instead of using these annoying prompts, oh, shit. Oh, my God. All right. We'll retype this really fast. I just refreshed this thing because I thought that's how you run it. Awesome. Okay, so input, oops, placeholder equals name, age, color. Go to my style for a sec and do just catching up to what we were doing before, where we were before. Background color, white. What else do we have? We had like a nice message that said, welcome. And then we wait for a second. Probably won't use this. I've used something like this before, and this one's kind of a pain. And we're gonna have a button, and its ID was button, and we'll make it say sign in. Okay, so we're back to kind of where we were on the HTML side. On the script side, let's go to my console, and we are going to essentially make a variable called button, and it's going to be equal to document dot. So it's just going to keep coming up. Signing in. I agree. I don't care. Oh my God. Search. Developer. It's myself. Okay, hopefully that gets us out of that. document. So we want to look for an element with the ID of button. We're also going to make a function, which I'm not going to do anything with yet, but we're going to call it sign in. And we're going to say button dot, we want to add a listener to it called click. And when it's clicked, we want to call that function called sign in. And just to test if this works, which is something you should do after writing a few lines of anything. Let's see. This, we get the alert sign in. Great. Okay, we also want to add some other things here. So we're going to make name value, or we'll say name equals document dot get element by ID. And we called it, oh, we haven't given it IDs yet. Let's do that. So remember, anything in JavaScript, we got to give an ID so that we can talk to it. This one we'll call name, so keep it simple, age, and color. At those name, age, color. So I can essentially make this, and I can copy and paste this a couple times. And we can do age, we can do color. Okay, so now we have these things to work with. So in my sign in instead, we're going to kind of do what we did before, except we already have, we don't have these prompts for anyone, so we're good. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what those values are. So right now, when we assign name, we weren't assigning the actual value of the input. We were talking about the box itself. So I'm going to make a new variable called name value, and it's going to be equal to name dot, I think it's just dot value. Let's find out. And let's type something here and go like this, and there we go. So good. So basically, because if I was just checking name, it would be the box itself, but we want the actual value within the box. So we might do the same for age, and we might do the same for color, and color, age. So now we have these in the values of them. So we can make another variable called message, and we can say it's equal to hello. Oh, something's frozen. There we go. Hello, and then do exactly what we did before, name value plus exclamation mark. You are age value, years old. And we'll just worry about that right now, just so we don't have to go off screen. And then we can go document.write message. I'm going to write that whole message. So now if we click run and go Tyler, 33 red, go sign in. It did it. I don't know why it is completely overriding everything. That's weird. Document. It must be replacing the whole thing. Maybe it's not right. Document.append. So I think write is actually replacing your whole document with that, which is not, something we want. So let's try just doing document.append. Tyler, 33 red. Oh. Hang on. It's Googling time. No. Might be append child. What is going on? Okay, we're gonna do this a little bit differently. Usually this is just for debugging anyways, writing it directly. A lot of the time it's better if you actually have something, like maybe we have a paragraph tag with an ID of message, and it'll just be an empty paragraph. Just to test it's there. There it is. Good. Or maybe it's on live mode. Weird stuff's happening. Okay, so what we can do rather than document art write, we can also get down here. Let's make a new thing called message. And I'll call it message paragraph. And that's going to be equal to document.get element by ID. And we call that message. And then up here, we can go message paragraph dot inner HTML. So we're saying the HTML within it. And we want to set it by using an equal sign to this string called message. Oh, run. Tyler 33. There you go. So it's essentially replacing whatever text in there, which is nothing, with this. We didn't really do anything with the color. One other quick thing we'll do before we sign out for the day is we'll get back. The one other thing we talked about was conditionals. So what we could actually do is before we even do all this, before we actually make this message, we can check things like if the name value is not blank, or we'll say if it is blank, we're actually going to not do all these things. We're going to make message paragraph dot inner HTML. So yeah. Name. This is just kind of like some validation, and we can do this for. We can do else if. Essentially, we could kind of do all these, and then at the very end, if everything else was good, then we would write this message. So. So we're saying if it's blank, we're going to write what is your name because they forgot to fill it out. So let's just test that. I'll fill in the other things, which are fine right now. But we're getting what is your name? Oh, Tyler. And then we get it back. So all good. Cool. I think that's all I wanted to get into today. I'm going to see if I can save this stuff somewhere so that I can kind of review it again. So in short, yes, this is different. It's all going to, I think, make more sense as we continue on. But this is kind of adding that extra layer to your HTML and CSS that makes it interactive, makes it dynamic. Yeah. So I'm going to stop this screen share. Oops. Where is it? I lost my thing. Okay, stopping the screen share. Good. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks for joining. We will continue off and review this stuff tomorrow. Cheers.